So today we're diving into the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. He was this Indian sage, and even today his work really resonates with people. We've got this book of his teachings right here, so we're ready to explore what makes his philosophy so unique.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that Ramana Maharshi, he didn't try to build this like super complicated philosophical system. You know what I mean? He just spoke from his experience. He really emphasized this path of what he called self-inquiry as the way to reach self-realization.
Self-inquiry and self-realization. Okay, those are some big words. Could you break those down for us a little bit? Like, what exactly is self-realization?
Sure, it's basically about, realizing your true nature, which at the core is pure consciousness. Just pure being. Ramana Maharshi, he would often say, and it's kind of a paradox, that you don't achieve self-realization because you already are the self. It's more about removing that illusion of separation.
Hmm. So how did Ramana Maharshi even come to understand this? Was there like a specific event in his life?
Well, there's this famous story about his own awakening when he was 16. Yeah, just 16. He suddenly got this like intense fear of death. But he wasn't sick or anything. It was really strange.
That's pretty young to be grappling with that.
Yeah, it was. And this fear, it led him to really contemplate death, like deeply. I mean, he even lay down, held his breath, and like imagined being dead, just to really understand what was happening.
Wow, that's pretty intense for a teenager.
It is. But in that state, he realized that even though the body dies, the I, that sense of self, remains. He directly experienced his true nature as something beyond death. And it wasn't just a fleeting moment. This realization became the foundation for his whole life.
So from that young age, he was living with this understanding of self-realization.
Yeah, pretty much. And, because of that experience, his teachings took shape. He became known for this incredible wisdom, and people came from all over to his ashram in India.
Now, I've read that he wasn't a big fan of philosophical debates. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. He felt like, direct experience was way more important than getting caught up in all these intellectual theories and arguments. He even said he compared people who only focused on philosophy to gramophones.
Mm.
They make noise, but they don't truly understand.
So he thought, you need to actually live the philosophy, not just talk about it.
Exactly. He has this great quote. It is those who are not learned that are saved, rather than those whose ego has not yet subsided in spite of their learning.
Powerful. Okay, so if it wasn't about philosophy, then what was his view on, reality itself?
He subscribed to what he called non-dualism, basically the idea that everything is connected, ultimately. But he didn't, throw that complex concept at everyone. He really tailored his explanations to whoever he was talking to. He met them where they were.
That's considerate. So then how did this apply to, big concepts like death and rebirth?
Well, he said that if you're truly focused on the self, then those questions kind of just become irrelevant.
In what sense?
Well, because the self is beyond those cycles. It's not bound by birth and death. But he also realized that, not everyone's going to just grasp that right away. So he also acknowledged the idea of karma and rebirth for those who were still kind of working through their understanding.
So meeting people where they were at, offering different perspectives based on their level of understanding.
Exactly.
Okay. So then for someone who wants to start exploring these ideas,
Yeah.
Where did he suggest they focus their attention?
He often talked about the spiritual heart, and he said it was located on the right side of the chest.
Okay. But I'm assuming this isn't the same as the actual physical heart.
Right. It's not the physical heart. It's more like it's like the true seat of consciousness. He encouraged people to, bring their attention to this area for spiritual growth.
So the heart, not the head.
Exactly. He felt that the mind could be such a distraction, that true knowing came from this deeper place inside.
Interesting. And what was the main method he taught for connecting with this deeper self?
His central teaching was what's called the path of self-inquiry.
Okay, and what's that all about?
It's all about asking yourself the question, who am I?
But I'm guessing it's more than just casually thinking about it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not just a mental exercise. It's a deep dive into the very source of that I thought. He believed that if you just kept asking that question persistently, you could really start to see through that illusion of a separate self and realize your true self.
That sounds like a practice. And speaking of guidance, how important was the role of the guru or spiritual teacher in his teachings?
He definitely acknowledged the importance of a guru, but he believed that the true guru actually resided within each of us.
So he's saying there's an inner guru.
Yes. And it kind of leads to an interesting question then, right? If the true guru is within, is there still a need for an external teacher at all?
Right. And I imagine this is where his teachings on effort and surrender come into play.
Exactly. So he emphasized, being dedicated to practice, but he also emphasized the need to surrender to something greater.
So you put in the work, but also you kind of let go of control. How did he explain balancing those two, which seem kind of opposite?
He said that, while we need to be dedicated to our practice, we also need to just accept that there's this power greater than ourselves. We're not actually the ones in control, and recognizing that is, key.
That's tough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They might think, this sounds great, but I've got a job, I've got family, I've got responsibilities. Did he ever say anything about, giving up everything to achieve self-realization?
He actually believed that you could do this inner work anywhere. It didn't matter what your circumstances were. He wasn't about seeking external validation or making huge life changes. He really felt that the true transformation happened on the inside, and that could happen anywhere.
You don't need to be a monk in a cave then.
Nope, not at all. He believed that, true peace comes from within. You can cultivate it right in the middle of your everyday life.
That's good to hear.
He even said self-reform automatically results in social reform.
Meaning what?
Meaning that as you work on yourself, you're naturally helping to create a better world.
So our inner transformation actually affects the world around us.
Yeah. He saw personal transformation as the key to societal transformation.
Okay. So if someone were to really dedicate themselves to this path, what did he describe as the ultimate goal? What's at the end of this journey?
He described the state of realization or liberation as a state of pure being. It goes beyond our typical ideas of happiness or bliss. It's like complete freedom and peace that doesn't depend on anything outside of yourself.
It sounds different from the usual kind of happiness that we strive for.
It is. It's more about realizing this deeper, more fundamental state of being that's already there.
And did he believe that anyone who's willing to do the work can reach this?
Yes. He believed that this ultimate freedom is our birthright. Anyone who truly seeks it can find it.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Maybe this is a good spot for us to pause and let everything sink in.
Sounds good. We can pick back up with our exploration of Ramana Maharshi's teachings in the next session.
So before the break, we were talking about the spiritual heart as this center of consciousness. But he didn't mean the actual physical heart, did he?
No, not the physical heart. He was pointing to an area on the body, just to the right of the center of your chest. But he was clear that, it's not an organ or anything like that.
So what was he talking about then?
It was more about, the core of our being, the I amness that's just always there. It doesn't matter if you're awake, sleeping, dreaming, it's always there.
So it's less about a physical location and more about the essence of who we are.
Exactly. It's that unchanging foundation of your experience.
But he did also say that people could feel it in that spot.
Yeah.
How did he reconcile those two ideas?
He explained that, while pure consciousness kind of goes beyond time and space, we can also experience it through our bodies.
So there's a connection between that boundless awareness and our physical experience.
It's like a reflection, Imagine your body consciousness as this tiny mirror reflecting the infinite consciousness that you truly are.
Okay, I like that. That's a good image.
Yeah, and that connection to the body is why so many people feel a tangible sensation associated with that spiritual heart.
So it's not just an abstract concept. You can actually feel it.
Yeah.
Now, some spiritual traditions talk about focusing on energy centers in the body, often called chakras. Did he ever teach about those?
Not really. He kind of acknowledged those practices, but he suggested a simpler approach. He said, to enable the aspirant to steer clear of any possible doubt, I tell him to take up the thread or the clue of I-ness and follow it to its source.
So going straight to the source,
Yeah.
that feeling of I, instead of getting caught up in the different energy centers.
Yeah, and he pointed out that everyone is familiar with that I thought. It's always there.
We all have that sense of me.
Exactly. He believed that if you therefore practice self-enquiry, you will reach the heart, which is the self.
So you trace the I thought back to its origin, and that's how you reach that spiritual heart.
Yeah, like following a river upstream to its source.
I like that. So for someone who wants to try this, how did he suggest going about it?
Well, he emphasized that it's not just about mentally repeating, who am I? It's not a mantra.
So more than a thought exercise.
Right. It's about turning your attention inward and relentlessly investigating where that I thought comes from.
But doesn't that get kind of tricky? Using the mind to investigate the mind? Like using a thief to catch a thief?
That's a question he got a lot. And he explained that self-inquiry isn't using the mind in the typical way, you know? He said, so you must turn inward and see where the mind rises from, and then it will cease to exist.
Okay, so you're not thinking with the mind, you're kind of observing it.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that pure awareness. You can just see the mind for what it is, like a collection of thoughts coming and going.
And he says that when this happens, the mind ceases to exist. What does that even mean?
He meant that you no longer identify with your mind as who you are, you know? It becomes like an instrument, not the master.
So shifting your identity from the mind to the self.
Right. And that's what brings like true freedom and peace.
It's like untangling yourself from all the thoughts that usually occupy your mind.
Exactly. You realize you're not your thoughts. You're the awareness that observes them.
So for someone brand new to all this, where do they even start with self-inquiry?
He offered some really simple guidance. He said, instead of looking outwards, look inwards and see where the I thought arises.
Sounds simple, but pretty profound too.
Right. Just redirecting your attention from the external world to the internal world.
And what happens when you do that?
He said that by turning inward and following that I thought to its root, you realize that, like, there is no separate I. It's an illusion. What remains is your true self, that pure awareness that you've always been.
So the I disappears,
Yeah.
and what's left is the self.
Yeah, like a drop of water merging back into the ocean.
And is that like the ultimate realization, according to him?
He often said, there is no such thing as realizing the self, you know, because it's already real.
So it's not about achieving something new, it's about recognizing what's already there.
He pointed out that people are always trying to realize what is unreal. He said, when you do that, you will remain as you always are, and the real will be real.
It's just letting go of the false perceptions and resting in the truth.
Exactly.
But surrendering control is a hard thing for people. It can be kind of scary. What did he say about that?
Oh, he understood that. Surrender can be tough. But he emphasized that it's not about becoming passive or like giving up on life.
Not resigning yourself to fate.
Right. It's more about, you know, recognizing that there's this power greater than ourselves and aligning your will with that.
More like cooperating then than resigning.
Exactly. Trusting that, you know, there's this intelligence at work that's way beyond our limited human minds.
So how did he recommend cultivating that surrender?
He offered kind of two ways: self-inquiry, which we've been talking about, and then also devotion.
So you can either investigate the self or surrender to like a higher power.
Yes. And he said that, you know, both paths ultimately lead to the same place, that the ego fades away and you realize the self.
Interesting. So even for people drawn to a devotional path, he still emphasized recognizing the self.
He often said that true devotion is devotion to the self.
So whether you're looking into that I thought or surrendering to the divine, you're still connecting with your true nature.
Right.
Now, some people find this self-inquiry thing really challenging. You know, their minds race and it's hard to quiet things down. What advice did he have for them?
He acknowledged that quieting the mind takes effort. You know, he said, of course it is not an easy thing to do. It will come only with practice.
So persistence is key.
Yeah. He said, this thought must gradually gain strength by repeated practice. When it has grown strong, the other thoughts will be put to flight. This is the battle always going on in meditation.
So you got to fight for that inner peace.
Yeah. He also encouraged patience. He said, keep on practicing and your concentration will come to be as easy as breathing. That will be the crown of your achievement.
Don't get discouraged if it doesn't happen overnight.
Right, it's a journey.
Now, besides self-inquiry and devotion, did he suggest any other practices for spiritual growth?
He definitely recognized the value of practices like chanting or repeating a divine name, you know, like japa.
So he wasn't against it, but maybe saw it as less direct than self-inquiry.
Yeah, he definitely considered self-inquiry the most like direct path to self-realization.
And what did he say about the benefits of those other practices?
He felt that chanting can help like purify the mind. It makes meditation easier.
So maybe helpful stepping stones.
Yeah. He also emphasized the importance of satsang, which means like fellowship with being.
What did he mean by that?
He said, if association with sages is obtained, to what purpose are the various methods of self-discipline? Tell me, of what use is a fan when the cool, gentle south wind is blowing?
So just being in the presence of someone who embodies the truth can be even more powerful than any practice.
Yeah, he felt that grace could be transmitted, you know, silently and effortlessly. just in that presence.
It really highlights that power of presence. What about visions or mystical experiences? Some spiritual seekers are really drawn to those.
He didn't discourage them or anything, but he did say a vision of God is only a vision of the self objectified as the God of your particular faith. What you have to do is to know the self.
So maybe they can actually be distractions on the path.
He felt that they could actually prevent people from realizing their true nature.
So don't get caught up in the fireworks. Focus on the substance.
Yeah, exactly. The goal is to be the self, not just see it.
So for people wondering how all this applies to, everyday life, what did he say about living in the world after realizing the self?
Well, he said that realization doesn't mean you have to, withdraw from the world or stop doing things.
So you don't have to become a hermit to be enlightened.
No, he thought you can be engaged in the world while still being rooted in the self.
But how do you do that? Like, how do you live in the world without getting lost in the drama?
He said it's about realizing that you're not the doer. Things are happening, but you're not the one controlling it all.
So letting go of that need for control.
Exactly. And that understanding brings a lot of peace and freedom, even when things are difficult.
That's encouraging.
He also said self-reform automatically results in social reform.
What did he mean?
He felt that as we work on ourselves, we naturally help create a better world.
Our inner transformation affects the world around us.
He really saw personal transformation as the key to societal transformation.
Okay. What about helping others? What did he say about, service in the context of self-realization?
He said that realizing your true self is the greatest service you can offer the world.
So it's not about doing good deeds. It's about being the example.
Yeah, he believed that your realization, it naturally benefits others. He said, since, however, there are no others for the sage, who has no mind, the mere fact of his self-realization is itself enough to make the others happy too.
That's powerful. So our own inner peace can actually uplift others.
Yeah, it really speaks to that interconnectedness of everyone and the power of self-realization.
Well, we've covered a lot in this discussion. I think it's probably a good time to pause and reflect on what we've learned so far.
Yeah. We can pick up with our exploration of Ramana Maharshi's teachings next time.
So, last time we were talking about how Ramana Maharshi emphasized self-realization.
And how that can kind of, naturally lead to a life that benefits others.
But he also kind of brings up this paradox, right?
Yeah.
That a lot of spiritual traditions talk about.
Yeah.
This idea that from the perspective of true self-realization, there are no others to help.
Right.
Can you, unpack that a little? It's a tough one.
Yeah. So he said that for the sage, someone who's realized that oneness with everything, there's just no separation between themselves and others.
So if there's no sense of separation, then helping others kind of doesn't make sense.
In a way, yeah. From that view, there's no one to help and no one to be helped.
But that doesn't mean that, the realized being just kind of sits around doing nothing, right?
No, not at all. He actually emphasized that the sage is very active.
Even if it doesn't look that way from the outside.
Exactly. It's action, but without that sense of ego. I'm the one doing this.
Right.
He said, inasmuch as there is no ego in the sage, there are no others for him. And he compared the sage's stillness to a top spinning really fast. It appears still, but it's actually in constant motion.
I like that analogy. So their actions just kind of flow naturally from that state of oneness.
Yeah.
Not from personal motivation.
Yeah. And he believed that this kind of action coming from the self is super powerful.
More powerful than consciously trying to help others?
He said, the spiritual force of realization is far more powerful than the use of all occult powers.
So just being in that state of self-realization is kind of the greatest gift you can offer.
Yeah, that's what he taught.
Now, I know there's been a lot of discussion about, the difference between Jivanmukti and Vidahomti, liberation while living and liberation after death.
Yeah.
Did he actually see those as two different states?
He actually said that the difference only exists for the observer, not for the realized being themselves.
So whether they're in a body or not, their state of liberation is the same.
Exactly. He said his state is the same before shedding the body and after. We think of him as a human form or as in that form, but he knows that he is the self, the one reality, both inner and outer, which is not bound by any form.
So it's kind of transcended the limitations of the physical form.
Yes.
Well, we've been exploring Ramana Maharshi's teachings in this deep dive, but it's a vast topic.
It is.
So for our listener, who wants to go deeper, what would you recommend?
This book that we've been referencing, The Teachings of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, in his own words. It's really a great starting point.
It's a great resource.
Yeah. And there are tons of other books, articles, recordings of his teachings that people can explore to deepen their understanding.
Any final thoughts for someone who's been listening and, wants to keep learning?
I think Ramana Maharshi's message is really simple, but it's so profound. The truth is within you, He encouraged us to look inward, to question everything, and to discover that peace and freedom that are already there.
It's a beautiful message.
And maybe the most important thing to remember is that this isn't just intellectual, it's, an invitation to actually experience it.
So live it.
Exactly, and that's a lifelong journey.
A journey that begins with a simple question. Who am I?
Yeah. It's a question worth exploring.
It is. And on that note, we'll leave you to your own exploration. May you discover the truth that's already within you.